Thank you. Hey, everybody. How are you all doing this morning? How good is Sunday? Really? It's only for two of you? It's a good day? How good is Sunday? There you go. That's a bit better. I'm going to put a timer on here because I could be up here for the next hour. And I'm not going to do that to you guys this morning. Not quite yet. You know, Garen asked me a few weeks ago, is it time? Is it time to come share your testimony? I've been kicking around church here for a while and I could feel it coming. You know, I could kind of feel that eventually I'm going to be asked and eventually this is going to have to be part of the process, and I'm so honoured to be here and to share the goodness of God, really. And as I sat down, I've been in Vietnam for the last few weeks and God has been with me many, many times in my journey, and I thought, how do I share the goodness of God in 10 minutes? Right? I could speak for eternity. I could speak for every single good word that God has ever shared in the world, and I still wouldn't have enough time, let alone in 10 minutes. So I figured, as to Garen's point, that I would just share a little bit of how I got to where I am here today, walking with the Lord. Would that be helpful for you guys, do you think? Yeah. So I'm the youngest of five. I have 4 older brothers. And I grew up in a household that's not really like Seventh Heaven. You know, the TV series? I loved it as a kid, but that's not what my childhood was like. It was full of love, but we had very little money and even less time. And as a child, the interpretation that I made that mean was that I wasn't really good enough, that I didn't have enough time, that there wasn't enough love to be given to me in my world. And so if we look at my worldview, the way that I experienced the world was that I was unworthy, that I was unlovable. And not only that, but there wasn't enough humans in the world to be able to take care of me, so guess who had to do it? Me. I had to take care of me. There was no one else that was going to be reliable enough. There was no one that was going to support me in a way that I could depend upon. So we fast forward into my life. We've got these two things, these two worlds where I'm not good enough and nobody can lead me. Well, guess what ends up happening? I need to stand on my own 2 feet. I need to be the one who looks after me. I need to be the one to find my worth somehow. And so I looked in all the places that one could possibly imagine in the secular world, really. By the time I was in my teenage years, I started drinking when I was 14. I looked about like this with a little less wrinkles, but I was 5'10" and I could purchase my own alcohol. Yeah? And so as a 14-year-old with parents who were just too busy, they loved me, but they were just too busy. They didn't really notice. No one really noticed. I was invisible often. So I kept seeking my worth in all the things outside in the world. Now I learn that, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I conformed to the pattern of the world. Drinking, smoking, partying, whatever I could, promiscuity, whatever I could to get my validation, I sought for years and years and years. And I had hoped that I would find probably the word that I was looking for that I never knew was salvation. That if I could just get enough, if I could just be enough, if I could just have enough, if I could just prove to the world how important I am, if I could get all the blokes to like me, if I could be in a way that would let the world see me as powerful and strong and famous, then I would be enough. Then I would be able to feel like I was complete. And I kept searching. And in my early 20s, I discovered that maybe the drinking and the partying wasn't going to do it. I was smart enough. God has graced me with enough curiosity, enough intellect, enough logic to go, hang on a second, what hasn't been working for the last 6 or 7, 10 years is not going to work moving forward. So I better try something different. I've been blessed with a curious mind, a very curious mind and an open heart. And so I kept trying new things. I tried the drugs. Alcohol didn't work. Doesn't, by the way. If anybody's curious, it doesn't. And so I looked. And so I thought, well, maybe it's spiritualism. Maybe it's the universe. Maybe it's witchcraft. Maybe it is, I don't know, traveling the world. Maybe if I get famous. Maybe it's Buddhism. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe. And I kept looking, and I kept looking. And I got all the things that the world told me to have. I got the car, I got the career, I got the body, I got the relationship, I got the money, I got the, to some extent, fame, I got all the credibility that I thought that I could have ever wanted. And yet there was a hole in my heart that was still not filled. Still. Now, I grew up, I'm going to be honest with you here because God knows my heart anyway. I grew up thinking that Christianity was a bit lame, right? I grew up thinking that religion was for the weak. I grew up believing that, pish posh, who would do that, right? That's my worldview. In fact, even when I went to youth group as a child, as a 14-year-old, I went with, guess what? A lot of questions. And those questions were met with rejection. I wasn't to ask any questions. So my curious mind thought, well, if you're not going to answer my questions, then you must not be real. You must not be who you say you are. So I rejected God because of religion. I rejected God because of the world. Because the world's really good at telling us to reject God, am I right? Yeah. It was much cooler to not be with God than it is to be with God. And I think that's still true today. Although I'm hoping for a revival. Yeah, may we lead that within ourselves and our own worlds. So let's fast forward to maybe a year and a half ago. I'd been working with the universe a lot. Right? The universe has your back. I was into spirituality. I always believed that there was something powerful, something bigger. There was a higher something that existed in the world. I always believed that to be true. I could feel it within my heart. Because the universe, God, was playing out in my life everywhere that I went, and I could feel it. I could sense it, and I knew it. Yet the universe didn't seem to cut it for me. It still didn't stick. No matter what I did, no matter what I tried, no matter how many things that I went to, it did not feel like the truth. It didn't feel like it had elements of the truth. There were moments of truth in it, and it reminded me of things, but it didn't really hit that spot. You know how when you really want that, I don't know, is there any Coke Zero drinkers here? Pepsi Max is not the same, my friends. Right? And maybe it's the opposite for you, I don't know. But when you're looking for the real deal, no amount of falseness is going to satisfy. I didn't know that it was falseness that I was looking at. And so I transitioned from the word universe to God because I felt like that was the most appropriate term. Universe didn't feel appropriate anymore, for whatever reason, as God planted and shaped me along this journey. That was about 18 months ago I started using the term God. Fast forward to about maybe 12 months ago, and I just published my second book. And in that book it talks about what happiness and freedom actually is. And if you keep chasing everything outside of you to get happy, you'll never find it. And that book changed my life more than I could have ever possibly imagined. Because it really forced me, even though I already knew it to be true, it forced me to go, hang on a second. If I have ticked all these boxes in my life and I'm still waiting, then there's something that I'm missing. And as someone who has explored personal development and human behavior and has been doing this as a career and in myself for the last 15, 20 years, I thought, how arrogant of me to dismiss Jesus without ever having known him. How dare I claim to be someone who is curious, who is intelligent, who is well thought out, and has never actually taken the time to get to know this guy. And let me be frank with you, I didn't want it to be Jesus. I really didn't want it to be Jesus. I was like, come on, all the people and the things and I didn't want it to be. But again, how dare I dismiss someone before I even met them? Because I think that's what the world does. And if I come back to Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, then you can test and accept God's will in your life, God's pleasing, perfect, and good will. To me, if I come back to that, well, if I suggest and hold myself to be someone who does not conform to the pattern of this world because the world wants me to be something that I'm not, If I'm going to be that person and the whole world is telling me not to follow Jesus, then there's a clue there. If there is such pushback in society on Christianity and on Jesus, why? I'm suspicious of that. So I better go find out. And so, on one fateful morning, I had already done some Googling, by the way, of all the churches around Batemans Bay. I'd already looked around. Southland was already on my little marker 6 months earlier, but I hadn't actually gotten here. One morning, I was empty. And you know what I wanted more than anything? To be around other people who were worshipping God. I didn't know it was Jesus at the time, but I wanted to worship God. I didn't want to use universe. I didn't want to use consciousness because I wanted it to be personal. I wanted it to be true. I wanted it to be something that wasn't just something that was empty. God felt accurate. And so I walked into this beautiful building one Sunday morning and I sat on that beautiful front row and I worshipped and I cried and I wept, which you'll probably see me do a lot here. And it felt true. Still nervous, still not, I'm just going to put the little toe in there. And after service, beautiful Nadine sat next to me and she said, hi, what brings you here? That old conversation. She said, are you reading the Bible? And I said, no, I'm not. She said, well, let's fix that. And off she toddles, and 10 minutes later, Ray gives me one of his old Bibles, which I still read to this day, which is still sitting over there. And like a very famous line in the play that we did, be careful, wanting to know is the first step to believing. I started to get to know Jesus. I wanted to test him, not because of my own arrogance, but I needed to know him before I rejected him. Because how would I feel about someone rejecting me without even knowing me? So I better go find out. And so I did. And all my whole life of not having anybody to lean on, of thinking that I needed to be the master of my own reality, my whole life of thinking that I was unworthy, my whole life, even though I'd transformed that by the time I met with the Lord, I still thought I had to be the boss. Because I'd never found anybody that I could possibly follow. I never found anybody who was worthy of my fellowship. I never found anybody that would stand up to someone who I would want to be like. Not in this world. Until I met Jesus. And that man, I tell you what, I don't know where any of you guys are at. Maybe it's religion. Maybe you've been in religion and you come to church because that's what you've been told to do your whole life. And I praise you for being here. Maybe you've never known the Lord. Maybe you have. Maybe you're curious. A little bit Jesus curious, like I was. I encourage you to meet with him. You don't have to commit. You don't have to give everything, but just get to know him. Irrelevant of where you are with your journey, I would encourage you to focus more on your relationship with the Lord. Because until you know who he is, until he has the opportunity to work in your life, you won't know the abundance of grace and love and mercy that is available to you at any point in time. Because there is a man that lived and lives, who came here, that loves you abundantly, but we don't know that until we meet him. And I love what Garen said just a few weeks ago, no matter how far you walk away from the Lord, the second that you turn around, there he is. And I'm reminded of Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will set your path straight. What a relief that this hyper-independent, I'm going to do it my way, can't trust nobody kind of gal can finally surrender to the truth. In Jesus' name, amen.